Next question, Natalie asked from YouTube, can you use binders like zeolite and charcoal if you have anemia? So
That's a good question.
unique
So
question.
anemia
Yeah.
is a
Hmm.
condition, and I imagine she's referring to iron deficient
Yeah.
anemia
That's
because
what I would,
there's
yeah,
yeah, there's a number of
think.
different types of anemias, but
Right.
the most common ones are iron deficiency anemia or B12 deficiency anemia. And that's where you're not producing enough blood cells. Obviously, you need iron to produce blood cells. Iron is really critical. It produces, it's the major backbone of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is proteins and iron basically, which helps to bring oxygen to the cells of the body. It's a very, we need oxygen. All of our cells need oxygen to produce energy. So if we don't have enough red blood cells, enough hemoglobin in the red blood cells to bring oxygen, we're not going to be able to produce enough energy. We're going to have a lot of fatigue. And, it can even be life threatening if it's not addressed. B12 is also really key for the maturation of the red blood cell. So it takes on the right shape and form. So it can, again, bring the oxygen to the cells of the body effectively.
Hmm.
So, if you're not, and usually when it comes to an iron deficiency anemia, the thing we have to ask is this individual iron deficient because they're not consuming iron? They're not absorbing. So that's the first thing. Are they not eating iron rich foods? Number two is, are they not absorbing iron? So they're eating the iron rich foods, but their gastrointestinal system is not absorbing iron. We talked about stomach acid before. That's key for helping absorb minerals, for example. Or number three, are they losing too much iron? So are they bleeding out, right? Or they have an ulcer, like we talked about earlier? Or do they have, Crohn's disease,
Hmm.
ulcerative colitis? Do they have heavy period? If it's a female, is she having heavy menstrual cycles? Is she losing too much iron? So that's always the question we have to ask with
Hmm.
B12. Are they not absorbing it? Or are they not consuming it? Because you're not really bleeding out B12. And so those are the key questions we have to ask. And obviously, if you take a binder like charcoal or zeolite, binders are going to pull toxins out of the body. But the concern is, are they also going to bind and pull out nutrients like iron or B12, for example? And so that's a very fair question
Hmm.
and a very good question. And
Hmm.
so it's possible we really don't have good research on that. However, what I would recommend is just taking them away from meals. So if you take them
Right.
away from consuming food, then you're not going to be worried about that. 2 hours away, at night before you go to bed, morning when you wake up, great time to take some of these binders. And, and that way you don't have to worry about it. Now, taking binders with meals, there are certain binders like fulvic and humic acid that normally are very safe to take with meals. In fact, they can actually help drive more nutrients into the cell. So those can be really helpful. Those types of bioactive carbons. I know on our website, on our store, we have a whole wide range of different types of binders. You'll see names like biotoxin binder. It's a fulvic humic acid blend. There's HMET, which is really designed for heavy metals and environmental toxins. A lot of different good ones like that. Those ones typically you can take with meals, and they work great with or without meals. So that's totally fine. And then the other thing is something like a charcoal, which can bind to nutrients in our food.
Right.
The only time I really would recommend taking it with a meal is, let's say you have a sensitivity to something. You have
Hmm.
you get an immune reaction when you consume something, and perhaps you ate that food unintentionally or intentionally, right? Because sometimes we do that, right? And that's a great time to take a binder like charcoal to help with that. Like, for example, when people drink too much alcohol, a way that they can help reduce any sort of hangover effects, things like that, is taking some charcoal. They can also take some liver supporting herbs that can be helpful. Or if you were, let's say you're gluten sensitive, you can take charcoal to help bind to some of that gluten and help support it out of the system. That can be helpful. So that would be really the only time to take that with a meal. But in general, if you take it away from meals, that should be fine.
Yeah, I think that's great. And we don't necessarily know why they want to be taking binders if they have anemia, but um, as far as zeolite is concerned, there is some research that indicates zeolite is kind of unique in that it has a structure around it where like a honeycomb in essence, where it will actually attract and trap the heavier metals like cadmium and arsenic and lead and mercury, while these other trace elements and minerals and electrolyte minerals, potassium, magnesium, these and all the trace minerals, it'll actually kind of help drive them throughout the body and disperse them, and that's a positive thing. While it will kind of lock down and take, lock in the heavy metals, and so from my understanding, I haven't seen any research where if you're worried about taking a zeolite and let's say you take it in between meals, I don't think it's going to necessarily go in the blood and make its way to the liver and like take your ferritin storage or bind up the active, serum iron. I haven't seen that really happen or in the research or anything like that. But I think if you, generally take them away from meals like Dr. Jockers was, recommending, and you probably, I think you want to address anemia, as mentioned before, with some of the root causal factors and absorption and, getting iron in and things of that nature. So, I wouldn't worry too much about taking the zeolite to bind up iron if this is iron deficient anemia that you're alluding to here. One interesting thing that I did find was that kind of random, but in a research where they had cadmium poisoned pigs, they gave them zeolite and actually prevented anemia and protected the liver. So that was interesting. Of course, that's not humans, so we can't create it's an association there. But anyhow, I thought that was interesting to share particularly with the zeolite. It's kind of a unique binding substance. So
yeah, that's really good. It would have a kind of an indirect effect by getting rid of heavy metals. You're going to have better cellular mechanics. You're going to have reduced inflammation in the system, and then better nutrient absorption. So it's kind of a downstream effect by reducing toxicity.